This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from Insurify, an online insurance agent that brings car insurance companies to you. You can compare real-time quotes side by side from dozens of companies, large and small. Available at Insurify.com. And BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at BetterHelp.com/public.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. It's just about noon and almost time for Week in Review. He's back. Here's Bill Radke with a preview of today's show.
Hi, Kathy. I was thinking of doing a dessert-themed show today because today is Pie Day, 314. So it's Pie Day. The Cheesecake Factory is closing. The mayor campaign is getting tart. People are moving here. Where are we putting them? Where are we putting them, you see? And so that's my plan. That's what I'm cooking up. Week in Review. You moose listen. See ya.
Looking for a break from heavier news stories? You're not alone, and KUOW is here to help. Presenting The Rain Shadow, a newsletter devoted to brighter stories from KUOW and NPR. Like the weather pattern of the same name, The Rain Shadow offers a sunnier perspective in a storm of information, with stories that spark joy and ignite your curiosity. Kind of like the feeling of seeing a rainbow through the rain. Had enough of the rain puns yet? Subscribe today at KUOW.org/sunny.
Support for KUOW comes from Mount Baker Roofing. From Everett to Blaine, Mount Baker Roofing has been dedicated to providing quality craftsmanship for 40 years and has installed over 20,000 roofs, offering a full range of services including roof replacement, gutters, and repairs. More at mtbakerroofing.com.
Find everything you love from KUOW on the new and improved KUOW app. Use the built-in alarm to make sure you never miss your favorite programming. Scroll the podcast tab and discover your next listening obsession from KUOW and NPR. And listen live anytime and anywhere. Download the KUOW app now for iOS or Android.
With egg prices where they are, bakeries are trying not to crack.
Everyone else can go without their eggs. Jacqueline needs the eggs.
I'm Kai Rizdal. How is Souffle Spot is staying afloat? That's next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace coming up this afternoon at 2:30 and again at 6:30 on 94.9 KUOW. We're going to get a little bit more vitamin D today before the rain returns overnight. Sunny skies this afternoon with high around 53. Rain all day through, all rain through the weekend. It's currently 46 at 12:01.
Hi, from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he is cautiously optimistic about his diplomacy on Ukraine. But while Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, Russia wants more talks about that. Here's NPR's Michelle Kellerman.
Wrapping up a visit to Canada where he took part in a G7 meeting, Secretary Rubio says it's been a good week on the diplomatic front.
We certainly feel like we're at least some steps closer to ending this war and bringing peace, but it's still a long journey. It's a journey of many steps.
Rubio says the administration will decide on its next steps after consulting with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Asked if the U.S. should trust Putin, Rubio called it an irrelevant question, adding, quote, "This is not a reality show. It's not about personalities. It's about doing things to end the war." Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
Congress is facing a deadline tonight to pass a bill to keep agencies funded through September or face a partial government shutdown. Consumer sentiment fell again this month following declines in January and February. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the latest survey results from the University of Michigan.
Even consumers who support President Trump's economic policies have been rattled by the chaotic way tariffs and other moves have been rolled out. An index of Republicans' economic expectations fell by a sizable 10% this month, while independents and Democrats were even gloomier. Survey Director Joanne Shue says many of those surveyed complain that frequent gyrations in economic policy make it hard to plan for the future. The outlook for the job market, business conditions, and personal finance have all worsened from a month ago. The president's trade war is adding to worries about persistently high prices. Expectations of long-run inflation registered their biggest one-month jump in more than 3 decades. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Well, the administration argues its trade policies will boost U.S. manufacturing, and Vice President J.D. Vance brought that message today to Bay City, Michigan, and played down protests outside the gathering.
I'm sure all of us saw there were a few protesters outside, and I can't be the only person wondering, it's a little after noon on a Friday, and don't you all have jobs? Who are the people?
In other news, a measles outbreak in West Texas continues to rise with 36 more confirmed cases. Here's Texas Public Radio's Gabriela Alcorta-Solorio.
The state health department reports the number of hospitalizations rose to 34 cases. 2 new counties reported cases. Since late January, 1 death has been confirmed in Texas in an unvaccinated child connected to the outbreak. Another death was reported in New Mexico at the beginning of this month. 2 of the confirmed measles cases are unvaccinated people. The rest are unvaccinated or their status is unknown.
That's Gabriela Alcorta-Solorio reporting. You're listening to NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Kevin Kniestead in Seattle. Yesterday was the deadline for federal agencies to create plans for large-scale staffing cuts, including at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. As employees wait for those details, some who were fired last month are speaking out. Rebecca Howard was a research fish biologist at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Seattle. She worked on surveys to assess the health of commercial fish stocks and keep track of environmental trends.
Firing people like me will make it incredibly hard for NOAA Fisheries to fulfill its mission, keep our fisheries sustainable.
Union representatives for NOAA employees in the Northwest say at least 19 staff members were fired between 2 fisheries science centers in Seattle. According to former NOAA Administrator Rick Spinrad, more than 1,000 additional NOAA employees are expected to be laid off in the next few weeks. Members of the Clark County Public Transit Agency have reached an impasse when it comes to paying for light rail on a new I-5 bridge between Washington and Oregon. Eric Newman with Oregon Public Broadcasting reports.
After weeks of community meetings around Clark County, CTRAN board members pushed pause on a vote about funding for future light rail expansion across the new I-5 bridge between Portland and Vancouver. The vote has raised concerns that opposition from the transit agency's board could cause a larger breakdown in the overall bridge plan, leading to possible planning delays or jeopardizing state and federal funding. Light rail is currently included in the plans for the interstate bridge replacement. It's a design element required to fund bridge construction. But a handful of Southwest Washington cities say they won't benefit from light rail because the tracks will end in Vancouver. CTRAN's light rail bill is expected to be around $6.8 million per year, according to the transit agency. CTRAN staff said the vote would come up again during the next board meeting on April 15th. I'm Eric Newman reporting.
And this is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, working to help protect small businesses and the owners that run them, offering customizable coverages to salons, accounting firms, tradespeople, and more. Learn more at progressivecommercial.com.
Well, welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. This is a nice show you've tuned into. We're going to consider the week's news. We're going to evaluate and explain and discuss. And if you like visuals, you can go to YouTube because we're streaming. Hi. And we have a panel here, as we do every week. Former Port of Seattle Commissioner and once candidate for governor in this state, now a columnist for the Tacoma Tribune and the Spokane Inlander. Welcome back, Bill Bryant.
Good to be here.
Seattle Times editorial writer and columnist Alex Fryer, and former KUOW reporter Alex Fryer long ago. Nice to see you again, Alex.
Nice to see you, Bill.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. What was that? When did we work together?
1989 is when I started volunteering for KCMU, so that would have been right next to KUOW.
And you were old then. Wow.
No, I was not. Actually.
No, you were not. And the editor of The Needling, Seattle's only real fake news, Lex Vaughn. Welcome back.
Always good to be here.
Today's top needling story, Walla Walla. Come for the wine, stay because you're in prison. And by the way, besides, does everybody know the needling? Yeah. What's the actual URL? The needling.com?
Theneedling.com, and you can find us on pretty much any social media platform, including Blue Sky, Twitter, well, whatever it is, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Yeah.
And besides wine, you actually this week have been thinking about cheesecake. Lex, would you explain?
Well, the news came out that the Cheesecake Factory was closing. And
downtown Seattle.
And, there was just coverage everywhere about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it kind of humorous because it's like, unfortunately, it's always sad when a business closes. All kinds of small businesses close here, for various reasons. But the Cheesecake Factory seems to be a big deal. And I just find it funny. I personally am not a big fan of chain restaurants. I'm fine with this kind of thing being out in Bellevue. I don't think Seattle's losing anything major here.
So you don't miss the Hard Rock Cafe downtown?
Yeah, but no, absolutely not. But, it seems like when you look at the conversation online, it seems like it's a big deal. So I just think it's funny. And I was curious, is the Cheesecake Factory a big deal to you guys? Is that a
Good
major
question.
loss?
Is anyone torn up?
I'm not torn up.
Make it seem.
I'm a long way. I might be torn up about a lot of things these days, but the Cheesecake Factory is not high on the list.
Okay.
But whenever you lose an employer downtown that employs over 100 people, that needs to be taken seriously, and it's worthy of concern. I'm not sure it's the concern that's being expressed on X or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're in City Hall and you lose another employer of over 100 people downtown, that's not good. Now, the question is why?
Yeah.
Is it because convention traffic is off? Or is it because downtown's a mess? Or what's the reason?
That place had no problem getting business. It was packed, usually. So it is, I think, just economically a curious reason why they're leaving, if they had plenty of business.
I hope they're having a private conversation with the city and letting the city know, because it's very difficult for the city to address the cause if we don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
I missed the groundswell of sorrow when the Cheesecake Factory went out of business. But I will say that a lot of people do care about downtown. I think surveys have showed that people care about downtown and want downtown to be healthy and thrive. And it is tough. It is tough to do retail and restaurants downtown. And what you're really seeing
Why is that?
I think it's a variety of factors. I think retail's got a lot of problems, just with online competition and a lot of other things. Same restaurants, increasing costs, labor and eggs and everything else. It's hard to
minimum wage,
labor. Like I said, it's tough. But public safety is a big issue downtown, and you still have a lot of buildings that have boarded up windows and just don't look like a place you want to go to. Third Avenue is really like a cavern. And that's a problem. So what you're really seeing is like Pike Place Market's doing great when those cruise ships come in. It is packed. It's shoulder to shoulder, but you're not really seeing that kind of economic activity kind of spill out up towards where the Cheesecake Factory used to be. So, I think it's something to keep an eye on. I think city officials are very aware of it. They have a downtown activation plan and all the rest. But, we need more people to move in and fewer people to move out.
And we don't. Cheesecake Factory did not deign to tell us why they're closing this particular location. A question for you, because today is Pi Day, because it's March 14th. 314. You got that? 159.
I'm on it.
265-358979. So I ask you: is cheesecake pie, or is cheesecake cake?
I think it's its own entity.
Yeah, it's not pie.
It's not pie?
It's not pie, and it's not cake.
It's got a crust on it.
It's its own
and
thing.
Filling.
I've always been curious about key lime pie.
Is key lime pie?
Sort of almost seems like a cheesecake to
it's
me.
It's a key lime cheesecake.
I guess it is more pie. And if you want to make the argument that it is pie so that you can eat cheesecake today, that's fine.
On Pie Day. Could be a custard. I don't know. Maybe listeners will know. Listeners, if you know whether cheesecake is cake or flan, or are lemon bars pie then? Anyway, feel free to let me know. I'm at B Radke at KUOW.org. Meanwhile, while you're doing that, we'll discuss other city issues besides the important ones you just brought up, vacancies and downtown activation. I want to ask you about the this week. Mayor Harrell got his highest profile challenger. And I'm wondering whether this mayoral election this fall is going to be any kind of indicator about whether Seattleites do we feel safe? Do we feel progressive? Do we feel like taxing ourselves? All that kind of stuff. Any thoughts about this, how the mayoral campaign shaping up?
I think a lot of people, including myself, were very much waiting for a decent challenger to Mayor Harrell. So it's like whoever had even a decent chance of going up against him has a lot of momentum behind them. And that this week it's Katie Wilson.
We should say there's a Capitol Hill business owner who's a Republican, Rachel Savage. There's a veteran, Thaddeus Whalen. There's a Tent City resident, Joe Malloy. There's an artist named Rye Armstrong. Katie Wilson is the biggest name to be in there.
Yeah, and I mean, she has the biggest kind of like, I don't know, built-in kind of support behind her because of all the work she's done on a lot of different progressive issues over the years. So I do see her as the more serious candidate because there's already some name recognition there. Mm-hmm. I think she's the one that people will probably coalesce behind to try to beat Harrell this
And
fall.
she's considered more progressive than Bruce Harrell. She helped pass the Jump Start tax, among other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know Katie Wilson except for by reputation, and I was glad also that she entered the race. We need a good contest. We need a good debate about the future of the city. And as of a couple of months ago, the surveys that I saw had Harrell at a very high approval rating, something like 60%, and I think that kind of made a lot of folks not want to get in. But Katie Wilson's absolutely a credible candidate, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion that I hope focuses on the issues that people care about, which is public safety, housing, taxes. I'm really hoping it doesn't devolve into who hates Trump the most, because I don't think that's particularly helpful for Seattle voters who've got a lot of issues on our own plate and a lot of city services that need attention. So I'm hoping that's the kind of issues that we'll have and the kind of debate we'll have in this campaign.
Yeah, this city's got issues, and we need a robust conversation about how we're going to move forward over the next 15 years and what we want the city to look like over the next 15 years. That involves all the issues, some of them which we've already touched about. Public safety downtown, a viable business community downtown, whether we want trees in all our neighborhoods, what kind of density do we want. I hope we can have a mayoral race where we discuss those issues and not, as you're saying, who hates Trump more.
It is going to interesting that he's running for a second term, and we have not had a mayor had a second term in a long time.
That's right.
McGinn didn't have it. Murray didn't have it. Durkin didn't have it. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of churn in City Hall. So this would be a real opportunity to see if we can elect someone twice for that office.
And I think there's a real opportunity for Katie to win this fall, not only because of that history, but because I think there's a lot of pent up anger amongst progressives in the city. And I think maybe a couple people were naive about how progressive Mayor Harrell really is. I think a lot of his policies that he's supported are conservative. And
what's an example?
I think, as Trump was coming into office, he supported giving SPD more violent weapons. Almost in preparation of protests.
Non-lethal weapons when
control.
Protests are getting out of control. I mean, that's not a progressive
Yeah.
or conservative position. That's just a common sense position.
He also took funds from Jump Start to cover, just like general budget deficit, the general budget deficit.
Yep, money that was supposed to go.
Keeping that dedicated to affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And then even, there's just really great programs there was a great affordable housing program that Tammy Morales, had worked on a lot, and the city council, trounced on, and he could have stepped in and stopped that from happening. He didn't. So I just think on a couple issues, he's been way too conservative.
Another issue which I don't think we will talk about, but I wish we would talk about in this mayoral race, is the financial sustainability of the Seattle model of continuing to spend and have budgets that continue to rise and just raising taxes to support those new programs. I don't think that is sustainable over the next 10 or 15 years.
Well, what's your evidence for that?
I don't have any evidence except a gut feeling that people are hitting the threshold of how much they want to tax themselves, and they're not seeing a lot in exchange for the dollars they're sending down to City Hall.
Didn't they just pass social housing? They passed everything, passing every levy.
I just think that there's going to be a limit, and you just can't continue to figure out how much you want to spend and then figure out how to raise taxes to get there. People are going to hit a wall, and those businesses are going to leave, and people are going to begin finding alternative places to live.
I don't know what the tolerance for tax is in the city, because it seems quite limitless. But I will say this. It was really interesting that Katie Wilson said that the social housing ballot was one of the reasons why she entered in this race. And, the editorial board was very much against
Seattle Times.
Yeah, Seattle Times editorial board was very much against it. We lost that one quite handily. I think 65% of folks went for that. But let's put that in context.
So you're saying Katie Wilson felt encouraged that, this is still a progressive city?
Absolutely. And I think that's what she said. And, I think it's just good to get a little perspective. At least my point of view is, that was $50 million of payroll taxes going into one social housing developer that has no track record, no plan, and one employee. Let's put that in perspective. If $50 million a year instantly makes them the biggest housing developer in Seattle, maybe the state or the West Coast, the city already spends $340 million to the Office of Housing on housing. That's not homelessness. That's an extra $100 million that goes to the Regional Homelessness Authority. And last summer, I did a deep dive into a development in Rainier Valley, 250 units of income-restricted housing. You had to be 80% of AMI, which average median income, which is about $65,000. They built that brand new apartment with no tax dollars. It was just tax credits for investors. So I think there's a way that I'd love to have a debate of not only what our values are, but are we achieving what we want to achieve with the resources we're putting into it?
Okay, well, for now, the voters seem, as you said yourself, they seem to be giving a thumbs up, and we'll see what kind of results we get.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
So before we take a break, I want to ask about one more city politics question, which is we have this, it's unusual in Seattle. Is there any other city that does democracy vouchers the way Seattle does? If you're a registered Seattle voter, every odd year election, you get an envelope in the mail. You get 4 democracy vouchers. $25 a piece, and if you want to, you can give them to a candidate running for office or different candidates, and they can spend it. Can they spend it anyway? Is it just qualified campaign expenses? Is it like advertising or haircuts, or do other limits?
I don't think there's any limits, but it has to go to a candidate.
Yeah, the declared candidate.
Yeah, not a ballot measure or anything like that.
Right. So, and the idea is it lets voters who aren't rich have some say in the process. It lets candidates who aren't rich build up some campaign money. And this experiment is set to end this year. Mayor Harrell said we should keep it going, and we should pay for it with more taxes, with a property tax. So who thinks we should keep democracy vouchers going? Anybody thinks we should end the program? No more democracy vouchers.
Can I raise my hand on the radio?
Is that you?
That's
Okay.
me. Yeah, I've, in honesty, I've never been a fan of this program from day one. I just have a problem with people taking money from me and giving it to somebody else so they can give it to a candidate who I probably wouldn't support.
Why wouldn't you support them?
What? I mean, they can give it to somebody else who I might not give my money to. But
you may or may not.
Yeah. So I fundamentally have a problem with it. But let's set that aside and look at what this program was supposed to accomplish. It was supposed to get more people involved in the political process and let people who weren't able to make a contribution on their own to get involved and contribute to a candidate. And it was supposed to help get big money out of our elections. Well, on both of those fronts, it has abysmally failed. Big money's not out of our city elections.
How do you know it wouldn't be even worse without democracy?
Okay, but it's not out. And you don't have people participating in the process. Less than 5% of Seattle voters are using their vouchers. The rest are going into recycling. So it's failed. So what do we do in Seattle? Well, if we've got a program that's not meeting its objective and it's failing, we should raise taxes and spend more on it and make it even bigger.
Well, what was the bar? Did the city say, and we're going to end this program if a certain percentage of people don't use it?
I love the program, and I don't think there was ever an expectation that we were going to erase big money and big donations and donors from political races, but it does.
I did
just
think
make
that
it
was
a little
one of the
bit
promises
easier.
that it would take big money out.
Okay, well, I would love for that to happen. I just doubt it I don't think I ever thought that was ever going to happen. I think it at least makes it easier for people who, don't have, like giant donations coming in to get, into the race, whether they're rich or not. I mean, we have a lot of corporate influence here from Amazon, Microsoft, big tech money. So to go up against that, you do need to have a system that helps people at least like get a little bit of like campaign funding an easier way. It's not fair that, if I support a certain candidate, I can't, they're just not going to get as much money from me because I don't work for a tech corporation. I'm a writer. I barely have any disposable income, but I want to be able to support a candidate that I believe in, and I think this just makes it a little bit more economically equitable, not just for different kinds of candidates, but for voters who want to see a more diverse field.
One of the things that I'd like to see over the democracy vouchers is to move the time when they mail them out from March 1st to the filing deadline in May, because that's when you know who the candidates are. And this year it's mayors, city council, the at-large city council, the city attorney, and the District 2, I think just Tammy Morales' district because she left. So those are the offices that are open, but no one knows who's actually going to be running in them until the deadline.
Why do they mail them out so early?
They say they mailed them out in January 1st before, and it was a mess because it got totally lost by the election day by then. So they just kind of moved it up. When I talked to the Seattle Ethics and Elections, they said, oh, well, that idea has merit, but no one's brought it up to us. So I brought it up. Move it up.
I think it's a good idea because, like, honestly, I'm the kind of person that, like, wants to get things off my desk. I don't like clutter. I don't like having to keep something on my to-do list forever. And it's like I have actually been wanting to use my vouchers, like, very badly ever since they've come. And I'm glad I've held off on using them because there's a lot more people who have announced their candidacy for city attorney and different council positions. So it's like for someone like me, I'm like, just give it to me, the filing deadline so I don't have to think about it.
Give it to Lex late as possible.
Yeah.
City.
I'm a last minute person anyway.
I understand that.
I would say there was one case that was sort of interesting of a candidate who got 14,000 vouchers worth $350,000, and he got 5,000 votes. And so you're able to go up and hoover in as many democracy vouchers as you can, pay all your consultants, and run a campaign that goes absolutely nowhere. So that's kind of a thing.
Well, that's democracy. All right. Well, so we'll see whether this democracy vouchers get. So would this be levied on voters, or would voters have a chance to?
Would it be the August ballot? I think. Right.
It'd be on the ballot. Okay. Yeah. In fact, you're right. The city council will decide whether to put it on the August ballot. Okay. So that's there's your little Seattle cheesecake mayor voucher update. We're going to take a little break because there's more news this week to discuss, and that's why I hope you will stay tuned to Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
Hi, I'm Chris Morgan, host of The Wild. You don't have to travel far to experience nature. Wild animals are all around us, like the coyotes that walk our streets, or salmon that swim in waterways next to Interstate 5. On the next episode of The Wild, how animals adapt to live in our cities. Listen to The Wild tonight at 8, or anytime on the KUOW app.
This is Week in Review on KUOW. I'm Bill Radke, and I'm chatting with my panel here. Lex Vaughn, editor of The Needling, Seattle Times, Alex Fryer, and columnist Bill Bryant are with me. And we, in real time, we've got listener feedback to our conversation. Okay, we were just talking about the mayoral race.
Most important stuff.
And democracy vouchers. Listeners didn't really respond to those topics, but we got some YouTube viewers telling us that we were talking about the Cheesecake Factory a moment ago, and I was asking on Pie Day, is cheesecake cake or pie? Henry says cheesecake. It's in the name. Very simple for Henry. Whereas David R. and David S. both agree that cheesecake is can you guess? Custard.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not factual.
It's not factual. I was kind of I was buying that. I would have accepted flan.
A custard day.
We should be a custard day.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the voting so far, 2-1 custard. And we have other news to discuss. First of all, we found out this morning, we haven't really digested this yet, but the University of Washington and WSU are now under federal investigation for alleged racial discrimination because the U.S. Education Department is announcing as part of its push to end DEI programs that it says discriminate against white and Asian American students. The department called out a nonprofit called the PhD Project that helps underrepresented groups get business degrees. And that group's website lists UW and WSU among their partners. Dozens of schools are named in this investigation. And so we don't know where that's going to go. I know that the incoming UW president, they have a new president coming in this summer, and Robert Jones has said in the past that the UW will, quote, maintain our values as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're going to see how all of that plays out. Meanwhile, there's a lot more on the UW plate right now with the Education Department also telling the UW and PLU and Whitman and Eastern Washington, you could face federal civil rights enforcement if you don't protect Jewish students from anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment. So, and my question, as I told all of you, was what is it that what does the UW have to do, according to the Trump administration, to protect students, in this case, Jewish students, from anti-Semitic discrimination? What is it that the administration wants from the UW?
I don't think we know the answer to that.
That's the answer to so many.
It's like,
what does the administration want? I mean, that presumes there's some end goal or direction to any of this.
I did look
Don't
at
get me started.
the agreement that was signed under I think it was the Biden administration between the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights and the University of Washington regarding some of these issues. And the resolution was really just having a policy, understanding what the discrimination policy is, giving the Department of Education some data, and then informing the students and faculty on campus what the discrimination policy is. So it was pretty broad.
I should just give a little background for those. I imagine you know about this, but in the protest on many campuses, including UW, about the Middle East violence, there were instances of areas where some students felt they couldn't pass, they couldn't get to class. There were graffiti, swastikas, and long live the Intifada. And so that's the atmosphere we're coming out of. I'm just wondering, what is it that these universities are supposed to do to comply with President Trump?
I mean, the reality is, like, UW and the students who were protesting what's going on in Palestine came to a pretty peaceful resolution compared to what happened at a lot of other universities. And I mean, UW should be proud of that. And I mean, what's going on right now to get this kind of attention from the Trump administration? It seems kind of like a delayed criticism of whatever happened last year. I'm sure the university is looking out for everybody, not just Jewish students, but Muslim students. But I guess, during this administration, we're going to have to just keep diplomatically as we can asserting, like, yes, of course, we're protecting students of all backgrounds and their safety and their access to all classes.
Yeah, but yes, sure, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just concerned that it's not only this situation that we're talking about right now, but you also have the president saying that they might take action against any illegal demonstrations what's an illegal demonstration?
Yeah.
Is it an illegal demonstration, a demonstration the administration doesn't like?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, you've got the Department of Education and the administration going after the curriculum of some private schools like Georgetown Law, sending letters to the dean criticizing the curriculum at a private university.
Mm-hmm.
First alarm bells ought to be going off all across this country.
Yeah. The First Amendment is under attack right now in a major way, and we're seeing that first, in what's happening on college campuses and the way they're being threatened, curriculums being threatened, protests being threatened, students just speaking their mind being threatened. So I think we have to resist some of these calls as diplomatically as possible, because obviously it's too easy to cause drama with this administration. But I think we got to hold our own and just say, yeah, we're doing what we're supposed to.
And we need to understand what the stakes are, because, and I don't think we do yet.
Yeah.
But how much of the ongoing medical human services research at the medical school in coordination with Children's and Fred Hutch could be in peril because of this?
Yeah, to that point, the University of Washington gets $1.3 billion in federal research and development money, which I read is more than any other public university in America, and the health complex is a big part of that. And this week, UW joined several other schools in putting a freeze on non-essential hiring and travel because obviously a big tool, a leverage that the administration has is this funding. There's already a hiring freeze at UW Medicine, and the Nobel Prize winning biochemist David Baker says it is already affecting their work.
New postdocs can't be hired. Individual labs don't know if they're going to have funding. These things could really have a very long-term effect, negative effect, really not just in biomedicine, but across science overall. It might be surprising to many people that actually most of the innovation doesn't actually happen in the big companies. It happens at universities, and the universities also train the workforce for the biotech and the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, part of what worries me, there's so much to worry about with this news, but I'm worried that this is kind of fueling a further privatization of funding of even public universities, where it's like when you take away these kinds of federal funds, universities end up more dependent on grants from private companies. And then I think no matter what people say, you end up, wanting to please them and not make them mad and do what they want. So I am worried that if there's less public funding for this kind of work, universities are going to end up just these like kind of cost-effective R&D, stations for like big, giant, for-profit companies.
I think this is the University of Washington and its federal funding is where Seattle is the most vulnerable to the Trump administration. And that was true on election night when Trump won. And I was thinking, where is this going to go? The MAGA base is not in higher education. In fact, that's how you would gather people to coalesce around an opposition to the Trump administration. So that's clearly his target. It's going to have profound ramifications for folks in Seattle who may not have any direct connection to the University of Washington, but will feel the effect of that loss of federal funding.
What's one example of that?
I think people will be moving out of Seattle. I think people will be spending a lot less in Seattle, restaurants, bars, like kind of entertainment kind of stuff. You'll just see a chill throughout the city that we probably have not seen, since the Boeing bust.
Are you talking about employees in the medical health complex, for example?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And folks who sell them their pizzas and their coffee and everything else. It just kind of spreads throughout the economy like a multiplier effect in a negative way.
Before we take a break, since here we are talking, any week we can and probably will talk about this effect, the Trump administration and Seattle and Washington State's place in it. I saw that the Federal Small Business Administration is closing its regional offices in New York, Boston, Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, and Seattle because we are all so-called sanctuary cities. Seattle's government doesn't do federal immigration enforcement. And the Small Business Administration said that the offices will be moved to, quote, less costly, more accessible locations that better serve the small business community and comply with federal immigration law. So Moses Lake, I don't know where the federal SBA is
That's
going.
where everybody wants to drive.
Yeah. What, Alex, why does this matter? I think you brought this up to us.
Yeah, it's this notion of a sanctuary city, which is a sort of a misnomer. The federal immigration authorities want to arrest someone on an immigration violation in downtown Seattle. They can do it. With the state law has restrictions on how local law enforcement can work with immigration, but they have free reign to do what they want in the city of Seattle or anywhere else. So that's unfortunate that they would just pick on sanctuary. Look, this is something for, again, the kind of the MAGA base that we can beat up on Seattle. Look at us. It's unfortunate. I've talked to folks in the SBA or used to work in the SBA and say, well, what is exactly that you guys do in here? And they said most of what we do is get a small business owner that can't get a loan from a private bank, and we guarantee that loan. So we work with the business person, we work with the bank, we get them together, we help them get a spending plan, and it's something that the bank could feel okay about. I didn't know that was a partisan issue. I thought we would all enjoy the fact that small businesses are being created and thriving. And to say like, oh, we're going to get booted out of Seattle, maybe doesn't have a huge impact, but still they had workshops and trainings in Seattle. Are they going to go to Renton or Tukwila? Well, King County is also a welcoming community in the same way Seattle passed by resolution to be a welcoming community.
Just tell them that Renton is the good place. And
right. They wouldn't know any difference.
Problem solved.
Alex, how many people actually, though, go into the office, and how much of this is done online?
I don't know. It's only one floor in an office building, so it's not a huge office.
Right.
And they have other offices in Boise and other places. But, I think the work that they do is important, and why I got in the crosshairs here is simply for red meat.
And honestly, it's an example of just how short-sighted and petty and not thought out a lot of the Trump administration's own bullying is. Because when they close this office, they're going to be closing an office in a building owned by Martin Seelig, who donated more than $50,000 to his campaign. So he's hurting one of his own major campaign donors, and it's like, sure, yeah, well, really got us there, boy.
You used to be a port commissioner, Bill. Is the Trump administration going to pick on airports in blue cities?
Well, who knows what the Trump administration is going to do. I think, well, this is off, but the story that I think is interesting with ports right now is that the Trump administration, after promising to take over Panama, was approving a plan for the privatization of the Chinese assets in Panama, and the Chinese now are weighing in saying, no, we want to keep control there. So ports, before this is all over, ports are going to come into play.
But what about this? So I'm trying to imagine what would Elon Musk say? Will Washington, or could Washington State and every one of the 50 states take on all the loan guarantees and research funding and everything else? Why does it need to be done at the federal level?
I mean, that's a tough question, because I think what you're really asking is Medicaid. That's going to be cut. And I think that's going to put the state in a terrible position, because you're talking about health care for low-income people. So forget small business loans. We're talking about people getting their necessary health care. How much of the slack does the state take up for that? That's a big budget issue for the folks down in Olympia right now.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think it's been difficult to watch Bob Ferguson, our governor, keep on saying he's not going to attempt any new taxes, despite a lot of support for a wealth tax, because it's like, we needed that even before the Trump administration came in. And now it's just like, I think there's kind of a desperate need for it. I don't think we can even fully tax ourselves out of the problems that are going to be created by this administration. But I mean, we got to plug some of these holes and make some of these problems less, less drastic than they're going to be.
We agree that we can't tax ourselves out of these problems. I think what we're going to have to do, though, is identify what our core values are, what is most important to us, and fund those programs. And in Washington State, the primary responsibility of state government is K-12 education. And that's got to be number one, followed shortly by support of our public universities. Then we get into our Medicaid, Medicare obligations, and then everything else is going to have to be scrutinized.
Yeah.
So subsidizing childcare and all the many things.
So I mean, remember, we have doubled the size of government in the last 12 years. Many of these programs did not exist 12 years ago. And I think we're going to have to go back and look at that budget from 12 years ago and realize that we might need to be closer to that than what we were planning on.
If we're saying that Washington State and all the other states, the 50 states separately, cannot pay what the federal government was paying, then we're saying we need to put it on the federal credit card, right? Because America, as 50 states combined together, can't afford the spending at current levels. Is that what we're saying?
It's not what I'm saying. Are you saying we should continue to raise the national debt in order to subsidize?
No, I was asking why can't each fifth of the 50 states pay for what the federal government is paying for now?
Well, it would have a devastating impact in red America.
Yeah.
North and South Dakota, Idaho, all those places.
Arkansas, Georgia. I don't know how you would ever tax them enough to compensate for what
they
they're
don't
getting.
have the tax base to be able to.
Well, what sucks is like, I mean, the federal government is still going to be taking money from us, but they're not going to be giving as much of it back to us.
Oh.
So, I mean,
something to think about on
not
tax day
fair.
on
Yeah.
April 15th, and we have to pay our taxes.
Maybe defer.
We are going to defer the show for just a moment because we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to talk trees and a few other stories we haven't gotten a chance to mention yet. So don't go away.
Hey there, I'm Katie Campbell, and I run the KUOW Book Club. Each month, we read a book out of the Pacific Northwest, share our thoughts, and hear directly from the author. This month, we're reading Ma and Me, a memoir by Putsata Rang. Her family fled war-torn Cambodia when she was just an infant, so she explores her inherited trauma and how she escaped expectations in the years that followed. Learn more and subscribe to the Book Club newsletter at kuow.org/books.
Support for KUOW comes from Seattle Art Museum, presenting I, Rebel, the art and activism of Ai Weiwei, opening March 12th, featuring over 130 works from the conceptual artist, including photography, sculpture, installation, and more. Tickets at seattleartmuseum.org. And from Third Place Books, journalist Malcolm Harris discusses his new book, What's Left? 3 Paths Through the Planetary Crisis, Sunday, April 27th at 7 p.m. More information at thirdplacebooks.com.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. Maybe you're watching the show if you're on YouTube, where we're streaming it. I'm Bill Radke, and I'm with my news digesting, evaluating panel. We've got from The Needling, the editor, Lex Vaughn. We've got a former Port of Seattle commissioner, now Tacoma Tribune columnist, Bill Bryant, and Seattle Times editorial writer and columnist Alex Fryer. Alex, you know that Seattle's having this huge debate, trees versus density. Does building more homes mean we have to rip out the trees? And you wrote in a Seattle Times column, will the city, quote, put developer profit before environmental justice and livability? Balanced land use or a metropolis remade by greed, the future be damned? Is Seattle damning its future with greed?
Well, I'm trying to sell newspapers here. You got to remember that. Look, I've been really concerned since the tree ordinance was passed in 2023 that I thought was a pretty weak ordinance and was passed under the objections of so many hundreds of people, because I got the public disclosure requests and seeing how many people wrote into the council saying, please wait on this. The Urban Forestry Commission and others hadn't had time to really understand what it meant for our goals, our stated goals of 30% tree canopy in the city of Seattle. We're not going to make it with that tree ordinance, and so it's been a concern of mine. In 2023, the Northwest Progressive Institute put out a poll that said 68% of Seattle voters were concerned about tree and a canopy loss. So, in some neighborhoods like mine in West Seattle, that's in the 70s. So people are really concerned about this issue. I think that we can do both with good design. We can prioritize saving the trees that are left, the big trees, the cedars, the Doug fir, the maples, and try and work with developers to make that happen. I think people, as much as they also want to save trees, they also appreciate that density is coming and residential neighborhoods are going to change, and they're okay with that. They're actually welcoming density. So I think we can do that. I think the environmental justice part of this is when I think and talk about tree preservation in Seattle, I make an effort to talk to communities like Beacon Hill that has been very concerned about the loss of tree canopy in that area. They see heat islands. They see temperatures in their neighborhoods that are higher than other higher income places in the city of Seattle. That's a justice issue. The column that you just read from was about South Park. I got the idea for that column. The genesis of that column came from a letter written by the Duwamish River Community Coalition to the city about the comp plan, raising concerns about declining tree canopy in their neighborhood, what they've seen, and dislocation of neighborhood residents who can no longer afford to live there. So I think these are real issues that I think a lot of Seattleites care about. So far, we've seen almost nothing from the Seattle City Council in response to this, except for acknowledgement that people do care and the law should change. But we have not seen anything in an ordinance or proposed ordinance to do anything about it.
Lex, can Seattle preserve more trees and densify, or would tree preservation make new housing development not pencil out for developers so we would not get the new homes?
I'm all for thoughtfully, protecting the tree canopy we have and growing it even. I have to say, as just kind of like a lay person on this topic, I haven't gone as deep down the rabbit hole as like Alex has on this topic. What I often end up looking at whenever I see this issue come up is like, oh, is this like a real tree issue that I should be concerned about? Or is this like one of those NIMBY things where it's like they're acting like they care about a tree, but they really just don't want this apartment complex or set of townhomes going up next to their house. And it's like I feel like I have to check in on a case-by-case basis. Is this a real environmental issue, or is this a like quote-unquote environmental issue? Because that has been so abused in this city. It's like, oh, I just really care about the environment. Like, no, you just don't want this development near your house. So I admit, like, I end up kind of confused on whether, we're dealing with a real environmental issue or not on a case-by-case basis.
I would think that, if Seattle passed a tree ordinance that Portland had, that Bellevue has, that Tacoma has, that Kirkland has, I think a lot of the tree people would be okay with that. It's Seattle particularly. This doesn't seem to be able to get this right. So I understand the confusion there. I'm hopefully and optimistic that we can do something about that, because if we don't, I make a point in my neighborhoods. I walk around. I just look at new development. I see the new homes that are coming in and the different detached units and look and see what happened to the trees that were on that lot. And as I walk by, they're gone. The lot is scraped, and they'll maybe put an ornamental tree, maybe a Japanese maple or something super small in the lot, and say, well, that's good. We planted a tree when we took one out. And, you keep doing that. And, I'm from Seattle. I've seen the changes in this city, and we don't have much left. And I know I just want to keep it. And I think the folks in all the different neighborhoods deserve to have that kind of tree canopy in their neighborhood.
Well, I think most Seattle trees are not in parks. They're in yards.
Yeah, residential areas.
So should the city require homeowners to plant more trees?
Well, there is a requirement when you scrape a lot to plant, but it's not the same size tree that has been removed.
What about just requiring the homeowners to plant
trees?
more trees in their yards? Yeah, if it's that.
So far, that's
level
been voluntary to plant a tree in your yard. It'd be hard to force, but
zoning is not is an imposition. Zoning is a government regulation. We're telling people what they can't.
I love your idea.
Edmonds does it.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not forcing people to go out and plant trees in their front yards right now, but I'm building a house in Edmonds, so I'm getting more and more familiar with the requirements. And there are no trees on this lot that we're going to build on, and we will have to plant at least 3 native trees. So it's not replacing trees we're taking down. We're not taking down any, but we will have to add 3 trees to the canopy.
What about tearing out parking spaces for trees?
I think there's.
Are there any parking places left?
There's hundreds of thousands of parking spots.
It's like I'm sure there's something that could be, fixed with the ordinance to make sure it's protecting some of the more like old growth and taller trees that are you can't just replace with replanting. Yeah.
Parking is a tough issue. I mean, I heard from folks after that column that were absolutely like, in the comp plan, they're getting rid of all my parking in this strip. And if we upzone to the extent that it could be upzoned, no one's going to find a place to park. And I had other people say, oh my gosh, we need more parking and less parking. And I don't know. I think there's a bill in Olympia that would eliminate parking in a lot of new development. So,
or you mean the mandate for parking in new
yeah.
developments? Yeah. Okay, well, Alex Fryer is selling newspapers. He's here from the Seattle Times. You can read more of his work. We just have a few more minutes left on the show. I want to mention a few things we haven't gotten to, maybe in short form here. Somebody set a Tesla on fire in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood last night, threw gasoline on it and lit it and ran. Earlier this week, 4 Cybertrucks caught fire at a Tesla storage lot in the Soto neighborhood. And at a Linwood Tesla dealership, somebody spray painted 6 Cybertrucks with swastikas and profanity directed at Elon Musk. President Trump called these actions domestic terrorism. There have also been peaceful demonstrations at local Tesla dealerships. Any reaction?
I just want to repeat, what Stephen Colbert said last night on The Late Show, that he denounces this violence from the bottom of his legal department. I have to say, I don't feel bad for Tesla. I don't know if I do any of that myself,
right.
But I don't hate seeing it.
Even if we might have some empathy for why it's being done, we don't want to condone graffiti and setting cars on fire. That's not the way to accomplish that. But what bothers me too is the president did say that he found the consumer boycotts of Tesla illegal. So now consumer boycotts, consumers choosing not to buy a product that he likes is illegal. Interestingly, though, he said he was going to go out and buy one, but then today they've announced they're going to get rid of all the EV plugs. So I don't know where it's going to go.
I saw that. They're cracking down on EV infrastructure. Speaking of boycotts, British Columbia just banned the sale of American alcohol in government stores, and the premier, David Eby, said that Trump's tariffs are one reason.
The other is to recognize the feeling that many British Columbians have now when we look at American products. We don't even want to see them on the shelf anymore.
Sorry, Chateau Saint Michel.
Yes. Canada is getting super patriotic.
Yes.
lately.
Yes.
They are very.
They're like, well, we do not need you.
Victor, yes.
I think about how angry Canada is, and we're gearing up for the World Cup next year, and there's games in Vancouver and games in here, and we always expected the Canadians are going to come down en masse and fill our hotels and whatnot. I don't think they're going to come unless there's some radical turnaround by next year. So, and we're going to have the champagne on ice and all the people staffed up and bars ready to go, and no one here, thanks to our federal government.
You're going to go to a Blue Jays game, and there's going to be more Mariner fans than Blue Jays fans in the park, which never happens. Other news, Victor Steinbrook Park reopens today. It's the one next to Pike Place Market overlooking Elliott Bay. It's been under renovation for 2 years now. Its totem poles are still gone. They're being restored, but that's a controversy. And the Pike Place Market Historical Commission said those totem poles are integral. This park doesn't open without them. And Mayor Harrell this week said that's actually the park department's call, and so the park opens today.
Yeah, I am fine with that anyways from Harrell. I'm glad to see that park reopen.
It has been closed for a long time, so it'll be nice to see it open.
Yeah.
It was my smile. You took my smile.
Oh!
The irony.
So I always ask, for those who don't know, I always ask my panelists, what made you smile this week? And so you were smiling at the fact that Victor Steinbrook is opening.
That the park is reopening and that the Marvin Oliver totems are coming back.
When do they come back?
Maybe they're being restored, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean to frown.
But they are coming back.
I don't frown on your smile, so thank you. Before I ask you about anything that made you smile, first of all, update. Another YouTube viewer, Josh, says that according to Siri, and I just woke up Siri's across, phones across the nation. That Josh says Wikipedia says cheesecake is either a custard pie or a tort. Neither pie nor
It's a tort claim. It's a tort claim.
Oh, man, the punning.
Hey, Kevin, while I'm talking, could you pull that file into the show rundown? In the smile section, I don't have that. What else made you smile?
What made me smile last night is Bill Burr had a stand-up special drop, and he taped it here in Seattle at the Moore. So there's some Seattle scenery before and after the special, and some Seattle-specific jokes. It's a great special. Talks about depression, and at one point is like, is this too much even for you, Seattle? Sorry.
Even for you, Seattle?
But it's another like banger from him. And I want to also shout out Terry Gross interviewed him, and the contrast of them together was another entertaining hour.
Very good. Hey, I wanted to mention something that made me smile for years. This week we lost Bob Rivers, who was the biggest star in Seattle morning radio for years in Seattle. And I would smile at he's best known for his song parodies. And it made me think of the controversy over lewd behavior at the Denny Blaine Park Beach. Some neighbors want to put a child-friendly playground there, and I think Bob Rivers would have explained it like this. At Denny Blaine, there is a beach that has some nudity. It's filled with bathers who've been coming there for years. And on occasion, they will drink some beers, prompting neighbor fears. At Denny Blaine, there are some neighbors taking photographs to stop the sexing and the scandal that it brings. And suddenly the mayor's cell phone rings. Can't you do some things? Buy some swings. Denny Blaine, protect your ears and shield your eyes.
Wow.
Or you could see some breasts and inner thighs. Denny Blaine. So thank you, Bob Rivers. You inspired me. We are at the end of our program. Week in Review with Lex Vaughn, Seattle Needling's editor, Alex Fryer, editorial writer and columnist for the Seattle Times, Bill Bryant, columnist for the Tacoma Tribune and Spokane Inlander. Thank you for being my panel this week.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I sure enjoyed that. Thank you. Producer Kevin Kniestedt and Kathy Faulkner on the board, and Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Hans Twite making us sound good. I'm Bill Radke. We'll see you next week.
Support for KUOW comes from Enterprise Washington with Budget Breakdown, a nonpartisan resource on the Washington state budget. Washington will collect $10 billion more in tax revenue over the next 4 years, with spending set to outpace that revenue. Learn more about state taxes and spending at budget